Hello guys and gals, and welcome to another episode of Haunted Gaming, where we take a look at gaming creepypastas. Last time we looked at a ritual, now we look at a gaming creepypasta called Super Mario RPG, Legend of the Seven Screams. I know with that title, your quality expectations may have seen a sharp decline, but let's not judge any creepypasta by its title. Remember, we did the same to Talking Angel, and it actually turned out to be pretty decent. So, will this live up to its reputation? Will it really deliver some screams, possibly 7? Well, sit back, relax, and let's see what this Super Mario RPG has to offer. Super Mario RPG was always one of my favorite games of all time, and it still is, even after that happened. The fateful night when my view of the game would change forever. One night I got tired of playing the games I'd been working on lately, Minecraft, Team Fortress 2 and stuff, and I wanted something older, and I thought, what better than my old favorite game? Mario RPG. In fact, I had even been neglecting my webcomic of it lately. I decided to play a little bit and it would get me in the mood to work on a new comic. I dug out my SNES and my box of games and hooked it up. Normally I just use an emulator, but I wanted to get the feel of the controller in my hands. The WASD keyboard configuration was just getting tired to me. Anyways, I got it hooked up and looked through my games: Super Mario All-Stars, Super Metroid, Mario World, Chrono Trigger, Super Mario RPG Legend of the Seven Stars. Found it. But when I picked it up, something was really weird. The cartridge was hot. I mean, it was really hot. It had never done this before, and there was no real explanation for it since it hadn't even been used for months. And even though I should have been more concerned with why it was hot, I wanted to play it. I put it in the system anyways and turned it on. Right away I noticed something else was really unusual. Right after the Nintendo Square licensing bit, there is usually a cutscene of Toadstool getting kidnapped by Bowser, and Mario opening his door, seeing her missing, and jumping out to save the day. This time, however, it was totally different. Toadstool was sitting on the ground on the same flower patch, but she was crying as if she was mourning. Where the usual happy music plays, there was only a crying sound effect, a sound I'd never even heard in the game before, and Bowser never showed up. She just continued to cry. Soon, Mario came out of his house and sat beside her, looking sad, and put his arm around her. He wasn't crying, trying to be tough. I didn't know what had happened, but they obviously lost someone very close. The camera panned up in the sky and faded to white. The screen faded back into Mario in his house doing various things, washing his face at the sink and looking over at the second sink and sighing. Sitting in the breakfast table with a place set for a second person across from him, he stared at the empty seat for a beat before breaking into tears. At this point, I knew who they had lost. It was Luigi. Mario was getting ready to go out and went for his hammer on the wall and paused when he saw the one next to it under the name Luigi. He looked like he was going to well up again, but instead just grabbed his hammer, pulled down his hat, and left. The cutscene cut back to Toadstool in her bedroom in the castle. She sat down on the bed and sighed, brushing her hair and looking out the window. That's when it faded to the title screen. Super Mario RPG, Legend of the Seven Screams. This was wrong. I'd never seen any of these sprites in this game ever. And because I'm making a comic, I'd seen everyone, even the hidden unused sprites. Seven Screams, on the other hand, I wanted to shut the game off because something was seriously wrong. But I was intrigued. I wanted to know more. I wanted to know what Mario was going to do next. Why Luigi was dead. Who or what was responsible. I had to hit start. The file selection screen was the same, only the Mario sprite you used to select your file didn't have the same old dumpy smile he always has. He looked pissed. And there was only one file. All my files were gone and I got pretty far on all of them, 2 of which had completed games on them. The file that remained was called Payback. I selected the file and Mario jumped off the screen like he usually does. The game faded in with Mario outside his house, and he actually had dialogue. He never spoke in the game, not one line, but he was speaking, and it wasn't pretty. Mario writes, "How could this happen? My own brother taken from me. I'm gonna do something. They have to pay." I could move my character now. The sign above Mario's door that once said Pipe House now said Mario and Luigi, with Luigi's name crossed out. I went inside the house out of curiosity. Everything was different because there was 2 of everything. There were 2 beds, each with a nightstand and a lamp. Mario's was the one with a green blanket and Luigi's was the one with the red. It was nice that they made some contrast there. I knew that was the case because I had to turn off Luigi's lamp. It would say Luigi wouldn't want me sleeping in his bed. I've got business to resolve anyways. I left the house and went for the overworld map, and there wasn't much to it. There was huge chunks that looked like they were blown apart by an explosion or some sort. Mushroom Way was luckily intact. I selected Mushroom Way and it went in. Everything had looked totally different. The dense forests and vines looked like they had been burned away, and there were charred enemies on the ground, some with mangled faces, and some torn in half with actual blood, which was never, ever seen in a Mario game. I got through the first screen, and the second screen wasn't much better. The hills were flattened, the once spinning flowers were now piles of ash. Once again, there were enemies everywhere on the ground. The full heal block was still there, even though I didn't need it now. I hadn't thought until now to check Mario's stats, and I opened the menu and went to the status and selected Mario. Mario had 2020 health, and already had a hammer, which I didn't think was weird considering everything else. His other stats were normal too, except one. His attack, defense, magic attack, magic defense were all normal, and there was a new one. Rage. And it was in red. That made me look at Mario's sprite again, and he still looked pissed. I closed out of that and continued to play. At the end of the Mushroom Way, there was a boss, but he wasn't alive. It was a skeleton of the Hammer Brothers that was once blocking the way, burnt flesh fused to the bones, actually. I inspected the skeleton and Mario stepped close, put his hand on it for a second, stepped back, and smashed it to pieces with his hammer. I was so shocked at what I was seeing, but it was making for such an interesting story I couldn't stop playing. I continued on to Mushroom Kingdom, but it didn't get much better from there. Mushroom Kingdom was in ruins. Walls to the houses were crumbled. Toads were wandering around looking sick, some injured. The place looked like Hiroshima after the A-bomb. There was no music. Faint wailing could be heard in the background. I tried to talk to one of the people since it was the first NPC interaction so far. He didn't say anything but ellipses. And I tried another. She said, "Why did you come back? Is there another attack coming?" At this point I was crying. I couldn't take what I was seeing. I had to stop and come back later. I went down to the inn to see if the save block was there. It wasn't. Come to think of it, none of the save blocks were there. The one by Mario's pad, if I recalled correctly, there was supposed to be one on Mario's Way. I think it wants me to play until the end. I paused it and took a break anyways. During that time I thought about what the game was doing. What was this new story going to tell me? What happened to the Mushroom Kingdom? Did Luigi die in one of those attacks? I guess I'd have to find out when I played again. I got back to the game again. I usually turned my TV off when I had a game pause so my dad wouldn't get after me for leaving stuff unattended. I turned the TV on and there was a message on my screen. "You left the game." I wouldn't recommend doing that again. Now I was freaking out after that, and I had to catch my breath, but I bypassed the message and unpaused the game and started again. The first place I wanted to go to was the item shop to see what kind of items the new game had, but when I got there, the front door of the shop was boarded shut, and there was a note on the door, and it read, "Item shop closed indefinitely by owner. Sorry for any inconvenience. I'm just too scared to keep going any longer." And I half expected that. The mean old shop owner was a coward anyways. I see some people's personalities haven't been altered at all. The only real change I've seen so far is Mario. Not really a lot I can go on doing, but go up to the castle and see the princess. And when I got there, I was glad to see the castle didn't get too much damage like the rest of the town. The two guards that usually stand outside the door were gone. I guess with the assumed thin members, they were needed elsewhere. Once inside, I was spotted by a toad immediately, and in fact scolded for not being there sooner. "Mario, where have you been? The princess has been worried sick about you. I mean, I would have gone to retrieve you myself, but Mushroom Ways lately been so... So how are you holding up?" Mario responds, "Better than you can probably imagine. Where's Toadstool?" "She's in a room, but I recommend you see the Chancellor first. I'll call her down for you." I moved forward towards the main hall where the Chancellor usually is. The room was a wreck. The red carpet was all ripped up, curtains were torn off, holes were in the floor, even dead toads still laying in places. Everybody still alive, leaped up to their positions when I walked inside. Chancellor says, "Oh my spores, Mario. I'm so glad you are here. Mario, there's no other way to say it. It's bleak. There's not a lot we can do right now, or probably ever. Mushroom Kingdom as we know it may be done for." Mario writes, "I don't care." There, I said it. I just don't care anymore. I'd set out again to defeat a powerful evil, but not for any of you. My brother is dead, it's all their fault. I want to find the person who did this and peel the flesh off their bones. Then I'll rip out the eyes, and show himself to them, so you can see how ugly he is inside. Then I'll rip out his heart, assuming he has one. And this hammer is going to get me there. Chancellor responds with, "Now Mario, that's a bit dark for you. What's come over you?" He inched closer to Mario, and Mario took a step back and another step back before and I couldn't believe it, he swung the hammer at him. He hit him with all his might. Even with the sprite so small and pixelated, I could tell what happened. He broke the Chancellor's neck. A small amount of blood came from his mouth, which took the most damage. The impact happened in slow motion almost. The other Toads just watched in horror as their used-to-be hero killed their leader in cold blood. Toad writes, "If we don't have Mario anymore, what hope do we have?" Everyone started crying and Mario turned and left the room. The game was really depressing me at this point. In the next room, Toadstool was waiting for him. And Toadstool writes, "I saw what you did. Why?" Mario responds with, "I don't know. You know this isn't me, but I think after that little display I'm a lost cause. I should leave and never come back. I'm sorry." Toadstool says, "Wait, Mario, this city is a lost cause. I think you did it a favor and put it out of its misery a little faster. Please, take me with you." And Mario writes, "No, I can't lose two people close to me." Toadstool tries to respond one last time before there was a rumbling, like when the sword EXqk came down and shook Bowser's Keep, but it came from the next room. Mario and Toadstool went into the main hall, and there above the Chancellor's body was the grossest sci-fi alien I'd ever seen. It was black and it had long spider legs and a giant head. It was one of the most well-done sprites I'd ever seen in the game, as in really high definition compared to the rest. Toad writes, "It came out of the Chancellor. Help us." It immediately starts a battle, the first one I had since I'd started. It was the regular boss music, and I was happy to finally hear some familiar music for once. I got my A, B, X, Y options and was ready to attack. I tried X to get a jump attack since some enemies have different weaknesses. I figured I'd test it out. I jumped, never did get rusty on the timing because I got it perfectly. Except it did 0 damage. Now it was his turn to attack, and with what just happened, I knew what to expect. It jumped on Mario, and, well, mauled him to death, dealing out 20 damage, which was my max HP. I was killed in one hit, and the music slowed down to a halt, as it does when all your party members die. The battle was over in one turn. I thought it must be a story event, and it turned out it was. I got out of the battle, and the alien was standing over Mario, picking him up with its mouth and swallowing him whole. Toadstool and everyone else could only watch in horror as the screen faded to black. The look of utter shock on my face was unimaginable. Why would someone do this? Who could think up such a horrible ending for a Mario game? It faded back in with Toadstool and all the remaining Toads in Nimbus Land, which I'm assuming was the only safe place left, holding a memorial service for Mario. The credits began to roll with no sound at all, just silence with people in the background crying their eyes out, and a wreath with Mario's picture on it. I kept it on for a whole credits just in case something had happened at the end, and I was right to keep that in mind. The thing I was expecting the least, it was Luigi. He poked his head in the shot with an evil grin on his face. He giggled loud in my speakers, and the screen had went black. I kept it on longer to see if anything else would happen, and nothing did. I turned off the game and turned it back on, and it was gone. The game was back to normal. Save files were back, Mario was happy again, and I started a file, and I was continuing in Smitty's factory. I looked at everyone's stats, and there was no rage. It was as if none of this madness ever happened. In a way, I was glad. In a way, I wanted to see how that story would have gone if... well, it's too late to think about it now, because it hasn't done it since. I don't know what my system was trying to tell me, but it sure was scary to think about. Well, that was interesting. Now, I feel conflicted in the sense if this is really good or bad, because there are aspects I really like about it, but at the same time, aspects that, well, I just can't tolerate. For one, I really have to say the story actually did interest me. Usually the amount of fecal matter I give in the story of creepypastas actually dies down considerably on a lot, and that's kind of been the way since the beginning of the series in general. But here, I was actually intrigued. You know, I actually wanted to see what was going on with the story. You know, maybe it's the way it was worded, the way it was paced, but I was feeling a little refreshed on finding out what was going to happen to these characters. That being said, sometimes the player reactions is one thing that really was a mixed bag to me. Now, at times it made a hell of a lot of sense. The player was intrigued like I was intrigued, so it's like, you feel this connection, but at times, tears are shed, and they're shed at a point where, you expect them to be shed earlier, if anything, because why the heck did you just randomly start crying now? Or, just reactions like that would really never, hit home to me, and it would just throw me off, saying, well, why? It just gives more of a confusion than an actual emotion to the actual reader themselves, right? Now, in terms of technicals, and this is where I was actually really pleased with, it made a lot of sense. A lot of this you could actually see in some very seasoned ROM hack, and knowing the Super Mario RPG community, hey, that is it's something that is very plausible, because the community is pretty huge. It's a very popular game, obviously, very well loved. And now one of the main technicals that I actually really like was a message that popped up, because it's something that can be coded into a game to pop up, if you just leave it idle for a bit. And if I honestly saw that with any game that acted in a creepypasta fashion, hey, I kind of shit my pants a little bit. So I did like the way the game replicated its technicals. It was done well. Even the very hyper-realistic kind of segment, which wasn't really hyper-realistic, with the higher-res HD alien at the end, was nicely done. It never, tossed hyper-realism and, completely, threw out this game into complete obscurity in terms of technical land, which you actually need to make a really decent gaming creepypasta in general, because if it doesn't sound believable, well, it's just not going to be a good story. Now, moving on, the game started throwing this cringy dialogue, which honestly got to anti-Sonic DLL levels cringy, but I can somewhat tolerate and excuse that, because hey, I was still intrigued in the story. When I got to that, it pushed me away. It tried as hard as it could to push me away. In fact, some of you it definitely would have pushed away. And to each their own, but I guess I can kind of excuse that when I look at the whole thing in general. Now, the game was obtained normally, but it never really gives an explanation of why the fuck any of this happens, which it really does need. That first act really needs a look over. The alien at the end feels more of a cop-out, and it begs for an explanation as to what the fuck it really means, because you have this whole, edgy world with, Mario going all balls to the wall, smashing a guy in the face with a hammer, and then you have this alien at the end just eat him up. It's like, well, what the hell? Overall, it needs work, but it's a shining example of attracting intrigue. Better examples exist, obviously, but hey, I'll give credit where credit is due. That being said, this has been another episode of Haunted Gaming, and if you like what you saw, then please like, comment, and subscribe. Tell me what you thought about the creepypasta in the comments below. Tell me what you would change to make it better. This is me, Mutahar. Dislike it if you dislike it. I am out.